The storm didn't roll in slowly. It arrived like it had been waiting, watching, choosing its moment. 1 second, the plains were quiet, empty, stretching endlessly beneath a dull gray sky. The next, the wind howled, not like a breeze, not like a warning, but like something alive. It tore across the land, bending dry grass flat against the earth, ripping loose boards from old fences, dragging dust and debris into the air like it meant to erase everything in its path. And at the edge of that emptiness sat a cabin, old, weathered, barely standing. The wood had long lost its color, faded into a tired gray that blended into the storm around it. The roof sagged slightly on one side, and the windows, what was left of them, rattled violently as the wind slammed against the walls. Inside, she sat alone, exactly where she had been every evening for years, near the small wooden table by the window, waiting, not for anyone. She had stopped expecting that a long time ago, but for something, anything, even if it was just the sound of the storm passing by without taking the cabin with it. Her hands trembled as she reached for the cup in front of her. Cold. She hadn't noticed when the tea lost its warmth. Or maybe she had, and just didn't care enough to fix it. The fire in the corner had nearly died out. Only a few weak embers remained, glowing faintly like they were struggling to hold on. Much like her. She pulled the thin shawl tighter around her shoulders, but it did nothing against the cold creeping into the room. The wind forced its way through every crack, every weakness in the cabin. And there were many. A loud bang shook the door. She flinched. Her breath caught in her throat as her eyes darted toward it. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. The storm roared louder, as if laughing at her fear. "It's nothing," she whispered to herself, but her voice didn't sound convincing. Not even to her. Another bang, stronger this time, the kind that made the hinges groan. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. No one comes out here. Not anymore. Not at her age. Not for her. That was something she had learned slowly, painfully, over the years. People leave. Or worse, they forget. And she had been forgotten long before the storms ever came. The wind screamed again, louder, more violent, as rain began to pour heavily against the roof. Water slipped through a crack above, dripping steadily onto the floor. Drip, drip, drip. She stared at it, not annoyed, not surprised, just tired. The cabin had been falling apart for years, just like everything else. Then 3 sharp knocks. Not the wind, not the storm. Knocks. Her head snapped toward the door. This time there was no mistaking it. Silence followed. A heavy, unnatural silence beneath the chaos outside. Her heart began to pound. Slow at first, then faster. No, that wasn't possible. No one would come here. Not in this storm. Not to this place. Not for her. Another knock. Firm. Certain. Whoever was out there was real. Her throat went dry. For a moment she considered staying where she was, pretending she hadn't heard anything, letting the storm swallow whatever stood outside. Because opening that door meant something she wasn't ready for. Hope. And hope had always come with a cost. But the knocking came again, this time louder, more urgent, and something in it, something she couldn't ignore, pulled her to her feet. Slowly, painfully, her joints protested as she stood, her body reminding her of every year she had lived, and every year she had spent alone. She took a step, then another, each one heavier than the last. The floor creaked beneath her weight as she moved toward the door. The wind howled louder, as if warning her not to open it, or maybe daring her to. She reached the handle. Her hand hovered there, shaking, not from the cold, but from something deeper. Fear. Not of the storm, but of what stood behind that door. Because if it was nothing, it would confirm everything she already believed. But if it was something, if it was someone, then everything she had convinced herself of might no longer be true. And that terrified her more than the storm ever could. Another knock, right against the wood. Close. Waiting. She swallowed hard. Then slowly, she turned the handle. The door creaked open, fighting against the wind as it pushed violently inward. Cold air rushed in immediately, sharp and unforgiving, stealing the warmth from the room in seconds. And there, standing in the storm, was a man. Young, tall, his clothes soaked through, clinging to him as rain poured down relentlessly. His hat was pulled low, shadowing his face, but his eyes were clear, focused, and fixed on her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The storm filled the silence between them. Then he took a step forward, not asking, not hesitating, just stepping into the cabin like he belonged there, like the storm had brought him for a reason. He reached back and shut the door firmly, blocking out the chaos outside. And just like that, it was quiet again. Not completely. The wind still howled beyond the walls. The rain still pounded against the roof. But inside, something had changed. She stared at him, confused, guarded. Her voice barely found its way out. You shouldn't be here. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, one built from years of certainty. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for a brief second, something unreadable passed through his eyes. Then he said quietly, "Neither should you." And just like that, the storm outside was no longer the most dangerous thing in the room. For a moment after he spoke, neither of them moved. The words lingered in the air, heavier than the storm pressing against the walls. Neither should you. She didn't know why that unsettled her more than a stranger stepping into her home uninvited. Maybe it was the way he said it, not as judgment, not as concern, but as if he already knew something about her, something she had spent years trying to bury. She straightened slightly, pulling the shawl tighter around herself as if it could shield her from more than just the cold. "You should leave before the storm gets worse," she said, her voice steadier now, though her hands betrayed her, trembling faintly at her sides. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he glanced around the cabin, taking in everything in a single quiet sweep. The broken window patched with cloth, the weak fire barely holding on, the slow drip of water from the ceiling pooling on the floor. His jaw tightened slightly. Then he moved, not toward the door, not to leave, but deeper into the cabin. He set his hat down on the table, water dripping from its edges, then crouched near the fireplace without asking permission. She watched him, confused, a flicker of irritation rising beneath her unease. "Did you hear me?" she said, sharper this time. "I said you should leave." He reached for a piece of firewood stacked neatly beside the wall, which she had been saving, rationing carefully, and placed it into the fire. The flames flickered weakly at first, then slowly began to grow. "The storm's not passing any time soon," he said calmly, his voice low, steady, almost indifferent. "You'd freeze before morning." The words hit her harder than she expected, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. She looked away quickly, refusing to let him see the brief crack in her composure. "I've survived worse," she muttered. He didn't argue, didn't challenge her. He simply adjusted the fire, feeding it carefully until the flames began to dance stronger, pushing back the cold inch by inch. The warmth spread slowly through the room, subtle at first, then undeniable. She hated that she noticed, hated that it felt good. "You shouldn't be here," she said again, but this time the words carried less force, less certainty. He stood up then, brushing his hands together, and turned to face her fully for the first time. Without the shadow of the doorway or the distraction of the storm behind him, she could see him clearly now. Younger than she expected, strong but not hardened. There was something calm about him, something grounded, the kind of presence that didn't demand attention, but held it anyway. "You're alone out here," he said, not as a question, but as a simple observation. She stiffened. "I prefer it that way." A lie, one she had told so many times, it almost sounded real. Almost. He held her gaze for a second longer than she was comfortable with, then nodded slightly, as if accepting her answer, even if he didn't believe it. The wind slammed against the cabin again, rattling the walls violently. The patched window shifted, letting in a sharp gust of cold air. Without hesitation, He moved toward it, pressing his hand against the loose frame, testing its weakness. "That won't hold through the night," he said. Before she could respond, he began securing it, tightening what he could, reinforcing it with a piece of wood from the corner. Efficient, quiet, like he had done this before, like storms didn't scare him, like broken things didn't intimidate him. She watched him again, but this time, something in her expression changed. Not suspicion, not irritation, something softer, something she didn't want to name. "Why are you doing this?" she asked suddenly. The question slipped out before she could stop it. He paused briefly, his hand resting against the window frame. For a second, it seemed like he might not answer. Then he spoke, still not looking at her. "Because someone should." Simple, direct, no hesitation, no hidden meaning. And yet, it unsettled her more than anything else he had said. Because someone should. As if it were that easy. As if kindness didn't come with conditions. As if people didn't always expect something in return. She let out a small, almost bitter breath. "People don't just do things like that," she said quietly. "Not anymore." This time he did look at her. And there was something in his eyes now, something firmer. Something that didn't waver. Maybe they should. The words hung between them, quiet but unshakable. The fire crackled behind him, stronger now, casting a warm glow across the room. For the first time in a long time, the cabin didn't feel completely cold. But she didn't relax. Couldn't. Because warmth was dangerous. Warmth meant comfort. And comfort meant letting your guard down. And she had learned over and over again what happened when you did that. "You don't even know me," she said, her voice softer now, but laced with something deeper, something fragile. He didn't hesitate this time. "I know enough." That stopped her. Completely. Enough? What did that even mean? Her mind raced, searching for answers, for reasons, for anything that made sense of this man who walked into her life like he had always been part of it. But nothing came. Only questions. And the storm outside, it didn't let up. If anything, it grew stronger, more relentless, as if testing the very walls of the cabin. As if trying to break through. She glanced toward the door briefly, then back at him. Still there. Still unmoved. Still choosing to stay. And that was the part she couldn't understand. Not yet. Because men didn't stay. Not through storms. Not through hardship. Not through someone like her. They left. They always left. So why hadn't he? And more importantly, what would happen when he did? The storm didn't weaken, it deepened. The kind of storm that didn't just pass through, but settled in, pressing against the walls, testing every inch of the cabin like it was searching for a way inside. The fire crackled louder now, stronger than before, but the cold still lingered in the corners, stubborn, creeping along the floor and up the walls. She could feel it in her bones, in her hands, in the quiet tremble she tried to hide. He noticed. Of course he did. He didn't say anything at first, just watched. Observed the way she pulled the shawl tighter around herself, the way her fingers curled slightly as if trying to hold on to warmth that wasn't there. Then, without a word, he reached for his coat. It was heavy, worn, still damp from the storm, but warmer than anything she had. He stepped toward her slowly, giving her time to react, to refuse. But she didn't. Not immediately. He draped the coat gently over her shoulders. The weight of it surprised her. Not just the fabric, but the gesture itself. She froze. Her breath caught slightly as the warmth settled around her, seeping through the thin layers she wore, reaching skin that had grown too used to the cold. "You don't have to do that," she said quickly, almost instinctively, her voice sharper than she intended, defensive, guarded. He didn't pull the coat back, didn't argue, just let his hands linger for half a second longer than necessary before stepping away. "You're cold," he said simply. That was it. No expectation, no condition, no hidden meaning. And somehow, that made it harder to accept. She adjusted the coat slightly, her fingers brushing against the rough fabric. It smelled like rain, like leather, like the outside world she had long since separated herself from. "I said I'm fine," she added, quieter this time, but less convincing. The storm answered for him, a violent gust slamming against the cabin, rattling the walls hard enough to make the lantern flicker. The light dimmed for a moment, then steadied, just like him, still calm, still present, still there. He moved toward the door next, checking the latch, reinforcing it with a wooden beam he found leaning nearby. Every movement was deliberate, purposeful, like he wasn't just passing time, but preparing. For what? She didn't know. And that uncertainty began to settle in her chest, heavy and unfamiliar. "You act like you've done this before," she said, watching him closely now. He didn't look at her as he answered. "Storms like this don't give second chances." The words carried weight. Experience. Not fear, but understanding. He had seen things, survived things. And for the first time, she realized something. He wasn't just staying because of her. He was staying because leaving wasn't an option. That thought should have comforted her, made this feel less personal, less dangerous. But it didn't, because even if the storm had brought him here, he was still choosing to stay inside, with her. The fire popped suddenly, sending a small spark upward. She flinched slightly, and without thinking, her hand gripped the edge of the coat tighter around her. He noticed that too. "Come closer to the fire," he said. Not a command, not a request, just a quiet suggestion. She hesitated, only for a second. Then slowly, she stepped forward, the wooden floor creaking beneath her feet as she moved toward the warmth. He was already there, crouched slightly, adjusting the logs, making space. As she lowered herself down onto the chair near the fire, the warmth hit her more directly now, wrapping around her like something she had almost forgotten existed. Her shoulders dropped slightly, just slightly, enough for him to see, enough for her to feel. Silence settled between them again. But this time it wasn't as heavy. It wasn't filled with suspicion. It wasn't sharp or defensive. It was different, softer. The storm still roared outside, relentless, unforgiving. But inside, something had shifted. "Why didn't you turn me away?" he asked suddenly, his voice cutting gently through the quiet. The question caught her off guard. Her eyes lifted to him, confusion flickering across her face. "What do you mean?" He glanced at her briefly, then back at the fire. "You opened the door." Simple, direct. But the answer wasn't simple. She looked down at her hands, her fingers lightly gripping the edge of the coat, still wrapped around her. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. And that was the truth. She didn't know why she had opened that door. Didn't know why she had taken that risk. Why she had allowed even the possibility of something, of someone, into a life she had carefully kept empty. "Maybe I thought it was the wind," she added. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. He didn't respond, didn't challenge her. But there was a slight shift in his expression, like he understood more than she was willing to say. The firelight danced across his face, highlighting the calm in his eyes. Not distant, not detached, just steady. And for some reason, that steadiness made her chest tighten. Because it felt unfamiliar. Because it felt safe. And safe was something she no longer trusted. The wind howled again, louder this time, shaking the cabin harder than before. The door rattled against the beam he had placed. The window creaked under pressure. The storm wasn't letting up. If anything, it was getting worse. She glanced toward the door again, then back at him. Still there, still unmoved, still choosing to stay. And that realization, it began to sink deeper now. Not as confusion, not as suspicion, but as something else. Something slower, something more dangerous. Because the longer he stayed, the harder it would be when he left. And deep down, she already knew one thing for certain. He would leave. They always did. So the real question wasn't if. It was when. And whether she would survive it. A second time. The storm reached its loudest point yet, like it had been building toward this exact moment, pressing against the cabin with relentless force, shaking the walls, rattling the windows, demanding to be heard. But inside, something else was building too. Something quieter, more fragile, more dangerous. The fire burned stronger now, casting a steady glow across the room. But it wasn't the flames that held her attention anymore. It was him, still there, still unmoved, still choosing to stay. She tried not to look at him for too long, but her eyes kept drifting back, drawn by something she didn't understand, something she didn't trust. Because men didn't stay. Not like this. Not without a reason. Not without wanting something in return. That was the truth she had learned. The truth she had survived. And yet, he hadn't asked for anything. Not a word. Not a glance. Not even gratitude. Just presence. And that presence, it was beginning to break something in her. "Why are you still here?" she asked suddenly, her voice cutting through the sound of the storm, sharper than she intended. He didn't answer right away. Just looked at her, calm as ever, like the chaos outside didn't touch him. "Because you shouldn't be alone tonight," he said. Simple, honest, and completely disarming. She let out a small, shaky breath, almost like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You don't even know me," she said, her voice softer now, but trembling beneath the surface. "You don't know what kind of person I am, what I've been through, what I've become." The words came out heavier than she expected, like they had been waiting, building, looking for a way out. He didn't interrupt, didn't step away, just listened, and somehow, that made it harder to stop. "People don't stay," she continued, her eyes fixed on the fire now, unable to look at him as the truth began to unravel. "Not when things get hard. Not when things stop being easy." Her fingers tightened slightly around the coat still wrapped around her, like it was the only thing holding her together. "They leave," she said quietly. "Or they find someone better, someone younger, someone who doesn't remind them of everything they're trying to forget." The words hung in the air, raw and exposed. The storm outside seemed to quiet for a brief second, as if even it was listening. "So you should go," she added, barely above a whisper. "Before you realize I'm not worth staying for." Silence followed. Not empty, not uncomfortable, just still. He didn't move immediately, didn't rush to respond. And that pause, that quiet space between her confession and his reaction, it stretched just long enough to make her chest tighten. Just long enough to make her regret saying anything at all. Then slowly he stood. She noticed the movement instantly, her heart sinking before her mind could catch up. Of course, this was the moment. This was where it ended. Just like every other time. She didn't look at him. Couldn't. Her eyes stayed fixed on the fire, watching the flames flicker, blur slightly as her vision betrayed her. Footsteps. Slow. Steady. Moving closer. Not toward the door. Toward her. She felt it before she saw it. The shift in the air. The warmth. The presence. Then his voice. Low. Calm. Steady. Right beside her. "You're wrong." Her breath caught. She looked up, finally meeting his eyes. There was no hesitation there. No doubt. No pity. Just certainty. "About what?" she asked, her voice barely holding together. He didn't look away. "About not being worth staying for." The words landed softly, but they hit deeper than anything else he had said. She shook her head slightly, almost instinctively, like her body rejected the idea before her mind could even process it. "You don't know that," she said quickly. "You don't know me." But her voice wasn't as strong anymore. He stepped closer, close enough now that she could feel the warmth from him, stronger than the fire behind her. "I know enough," he said again, and this time, it didn't sound mysterious. It sounded certain, real. Her chest tightened, her breathing uneven now, shallow, like she didn't know what to do with the space between them. "Why?" she whispered. One word, heavy with everything she couldn't explain. Why stay? Why care? Why her? The storm roared again outside, loud, violent, but inside, it felt distant now, faded, because everything was focused on this moment, on his answer. He didn't rush it, didn't fill the silence too quickly. He let it sit, let it matter. Then quietly, "Because you're still here." She blinked, confused, vulnerable. "What does that mean?" He held her gaze, unwavering. "It means you didn't give up," he said. "It means you stayed. Even when everything told you to walk away." The words hit something deep inside her. Something she had buried. Something she didn't want to acknowledge. Her eyes dropped, her defenses cracking further now, piece by piece. "That doesn't make me worth anything," she said softly. "It makes you strong," he replied. And that was it. That was the moment. The final piece. The thing she hadn't expected. The thing she hadn't prepared for. Because no one had ever said that to her before. No one had ever looked at her and seen strength instead of age. Worth instead of time. Something inside her broke. Not loudly. Not suddenly. But quietly. Deeply. "You're too kind to me," she whispered, her voice trembling now. Softer than the storm. Softer than the fire. Softer than anything in that room. Her eyes fell, unable to hold his gaze any longer. "No man has ever stayed like this," she added, the truth slipping out before she could stop it. "Not for me." Silence followed. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It wasn't uncertain. It was full. And then, without a word, he moved. Slowly, gently, he stepped closer and wrapped his arms around her. Not forcefully, not suddenly, just there. Solid, warm, real. She froze for a split second, her body caught between instinct and something new. Something unfamiliar. Something she didn't know how to respond to. But then, she didn't pull away, didn't resist, didn't question it. For the first time in years, she let herself. The storm didn't stop. Not immediately. It still roared outside, wind crashing against the cabin, rain pounding relentlessly against the roof as if it refused to let go of the night. But inside, everything had changed. She didn't pull away. Not this time. Not like before. His arms remained around her, steady, warm, unwavering, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't feel cold. Not in her hands. Not in her chest. Not in the quiet places she had learned to ignore. She felt it. The warmth, the presence, the stillness that came from someone choosing to stay without being asked. Her fingers hesitated for a moment, unsure, uncertain, like they had forgotten what it meant to reach for someone. Then slowly, carefully, she held on to him. Not tightly, not desperately, just enough to confirm that he was real. That this moment wasn't something her loneliness had created to comfort her through another endless night. The fire crackled behind them, stronger now, filling the cabin with a soft glow that pushed the darkness further into the corners. The storm still pressed against the walls, but it no longer felt like it was winning. Because for the first time, she wasn't facing it alone. Time passed, quietly, gently, without urgency, without fear. The kind of time that didn't rush forward but settled, allowing each second to be felt, to be understood. He didn't speak, didn't break the moment. He simply stayed. And that was what mattered. Eventually, she pulled back slightly, just enough to look at him. Her eyes searched his face, not with suspicion anymore, not with fear, but with something softer, something that hadn't been there before. "You're still here," she said quietly. It wasn't disbelief. It wasn't doubt. It was something closer to realization. He met her gaze, calm as ever. "I told you I would be." Simple, certain, unshaken. She looked at him for a moment longer, then let out a slow breath, the tension in her shoulders easing in a way she hadn't allowed in years. "Most people say things like that," she said softly. "They just don't mean it." He didn't respond right away, didn't defend himself, didn't try to prove anything, because he didn't need to. He had already done that, by staying, by not leaving, by being there when no one else was. The storm outside began to shift slightly, not weaker, but different, less chaotic, less violent, like it was beginning to lose its grip on the night. She noticed it, of course she did, but for once, she didn't focus on it. Her attention stayed where it had been all along, on him. "What happens when the storm ends?" she asked quietly. The question came from somewhere deeper now, somewhere more vulnerable, more honest. Because the storm wasn't the only thing she was afraid of. He understood that. You could see it in the way his expression softened slightly, in the way his eyes didn't avoid hers. "Morning comes," he said. She nodded slowly, but her gaze didn't drop. "And you?" A pause. Not long, not uncertain, just enough to let the question settle. Then, "I'm still here." The answer was simple, but it carried weight. More than promises, more than words, because it wasn't about forever. It wasn't about guarantees. It was about now, about choosing to stay when it mattered most. Her eyes lingered on him for a moment longer, searching for something, anything, that might suggest he didn't mean it. But there was nothing, no hesitation, no doubt, just the same quiet certainty he had carried since the moment he stepped through that door. And slowly, she nodded, not because she fully believed it, not yet, but because for the first time she wanted to. The fire burned lower as the night stretched on, the storm gradually easing, its rage fading into something distant, something that no longer demanded attention. And still he stayed, not moving, not leaving, not changing his mind, just there, with her, through the silence, through the quiet, through everything she had believed would push someone away. And when the first light of morning finally broke through the horizon, slipping gently through the cracks in the window, painting the cabin in soft gold, she noticed something. The storm was gone, completely. The wind had calmed, the rain had stopped, the world outside was still, peaceful, like nothing had ever happened. But inside, everything had. She looked at him again, half expecting the moment to end, half expecting him to step away, to put distance between them, to become like everyone else who had passed through her life. But he didn't. He was still there, exactly where he had been, exactly where he said he would be. And something inside her, something she had locked away for years, finally let go. "Maybe," she began softly, her voice still carrying traces of uncertainty, but no longer weighed down by fear. She hesitated for a second, then continued. "Maybe I was wrong." He didn't interrupt, didn't rush her, just listened. "Maybe I'm not too old," she said quietly. The words felt unfamiliar, new, like they didn't fully belong to her yet, but they were real, and for the first time, they didn't feel impossible. She looked at him, her expression softer now, lighter somehow, as if the weight she had been carrying had shifted, even if just slightly. "Maybe I was just waiting," she added. A pause, a breath, then, "for someone who wouldn't leave." The words settled between them, quiet but powerful, carrying everything the night had changed, everything she had begun to understand. He didn't respond with words. He didn't need to, because he was still there. And sometimes, that was enough, more than enough. And as the sunlight filled the cabin, replacing the shadows, warming the space that had once felt so empty, she realized something she hadn't allowed herself to believe in a long time. Maybe love didn't come when it was convenient. Maybe it didn't come when you were ready. Maybe it came when everything felt lost, when the storm was at its worst, when you had nothing left to give. And maybe, just maybe, it stayed. If this story touched you, if you believe that love can find you even when you feel unworthy, then don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Because sometimes, the right person doesn't walk away. They stay.